Hey everyone, so it's time for the next video. I know that I said last time I'd do finishing touches to eyeshadow, but then I kind of remembered that that's not my makeup routine. So anyway, change of plans. Today we're going to do face stuff, like foundation, contour and stuff like that. So as you can see, I've already got my eyeshadow, graphic liner and eyeliner done. I've mapped my eyebrows, and that's okay because the foundation's going to cover that up. So let's get started. Okay, so I know I've talked about this before, but one of the key things in your makeup, well, kit, routine, whatever, is primer. I talked about it a lot in the eyeshadow video, and it's the same for your skin. Primer, I know some people say, oh, is it really necessary? Well, yeah, it is, because it kind of changes the way that it looks at the end and the way that it lasts. So definitely primer, I can't say that enough. I have really dry skin, so I actually at the moment am using an oil primer. But there's all sorts of primers out there. There's gels, there's pastes, there's putty, there's creams. Probably my top 3 favourites are the gel ones, the oil one that I'm using at the moment, and some of the creams. But obviously that's just because of my skin type. So obviously if you've got, say, oily skin, you may not be wanting to introduce another oil onto it. So it's important to make sure that you get the correct one for your skin type. So I'm just going to go ahead. This one's in an eyedropper. And I just put a couple of drops on my forehead and a couple of drops underneath my eyes, because when we're talking about skincare and like skin makeup, I guess we might say, under my eyes there and around my nose are my problem areas. If I end up getting the wrong foundation or the wrong primer, that's usually where I have the most problems, where it tends to look really cakey and dry and powdery, and we don't want that. So it depends a lot on your foundation choice and also on your primer choice, but also really important before you even begin your skincare, like your moisturizers and stuff like that. So I'm not really rubbing it in, but I'm just kind of distributing it like all over my face. And don't forget the neck, because lots of people do, and even I do. I nearly forgot it just then. But as you've noticed, I'm like kind of really concentrating on that under eye area and around my nose. Okay, so as you can see, it looks quite shiny, but on me that's a good thing, because if my skin's too dry, the foundation's going to look really, really bad. It'll look like a piece of paper or something stupid like that, and I can't deal with that situation. Okay, so lip balm, that's for like lipstick later. Now I'm just going to give that primer just a few seconds to settle in, and then I'll be right back with the next step. Okay everyone, so the next step that I usually do in the skin part of my makeup routine is color corrector. Now you can buy little stick color correctors, or you can buy color corrector palettes. Just as a rough guideline, I use 4 color correctors. I use a green, a pink, a lilac and a yellow. Now green is for any areas of redness, as you can see. I've got a lovely little pimple appearing there. Love it, fantastic. And I've got a little bit of redness across my nose and just here on my cheeks. Also, as I was saying before, one of my biggest problem areas, my under eye area, you can see that I've got quite a big dark circle under there. So we'll be putting some yellow colour corrector under there because yellow counteracts, well, like purple. So under there. And actually what I was saying before with redness, green counteracts redness. Now the pink colour corrector that I use, I usually put in these dark areas here around my nose just to even it out a bit because pink corrects darker areas. And I usually just put a tiny bit of lilac under here just because, I don't know, just because. But as I was saying, lilac corrects yellow tones. Good morning, Tegan. It's still morning, doll. Yeah, I know. I woke up with a hairstyle like that too.
I turned into 80.
Alright, as I was saying, colour corrector. Now, I'm going to use a palette today. Once again, no brand names, but that's my colour correcting palette. As you can see, it's also got concealer and contour and all sorts of stuff on it. But yeah, that's what I'm using at the moment. So we're going to start with, and I'm using just a soft flat brush to apply. So I'm going to start with green. Hi, bestie. Yeah, mate. We're definitely going to put some on that pimple there because, you know what? No. Then I'm just going to place a little bit around my nose. That didn't work well, did it? Oh, that's better. And just like on this cheek area here. We're going to blend this in with a brush anyway, so I'm not too worried about the fact that there's like lines everywhere. Now, with the pink, as I was saying before, I like to kind of fill in the dark area here around the edge of my nose. As you can see how with that side that's not done and then this one here, it looks like there's no big gap there, whereas in there it looks like a cavern or something. I don't know, but we're not going to deal with that today. We're going to just do this. Actually, we're not going to deal with that any day. What are we talking about? Anyway, so that's that done. I'm just kind of dabbing the edge of it so that it's not like tung. Yes, mate. Just for a little while, okay?
Yeah.
Now, lilac. I'm just going to run a little bit under here. I know. Yes, Shenzi. Now we're going to do yellow under my eyes. And I'm just going to join it up to the side of my nose there. Shout out to my friend Hayley Brown. She is a consultant for a certain makeup company, which I won't mention here. But she taught me that you always apply your makeup down because of the little fine hairs that are on the surface of your skin. So, shout out to you, Hayley. So I'm just going to put that yellow colour corrector in that like pouchy under eye area. That's so funny. Pouchy. I love it. Anyway. Okay, so that's our colour corrector. Now I'm going to blend it in. Whoops. Okay. So I've just got like a little flat, I don't know what you call this. Is it a buffing brush or a kabuki brush? I don't know. But anyway, I'm not really like pressing it hard onto the skin because I don't want to kind of have the brush remove what I've just put on, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of just dabbing at it and just slightly brushing the edges so you can actually see that like where the colour corrector's been put, like the edges around it have been blurred but still there's coverage in the middle. So I'm just kind of lightly brushing it down just so that it's not a big line on my face, because I know I've talked about this a lot in the eyeshadow videos with respect to blending and things like that. We don't want any harsh lines everywhere. And especially when I've been doing makeup, I've learned a lot through trial and error. And sometimes if you leave harsh lines with your colour corrector underneath your foundation, you can still kind of see it a bit. Of course, that depends on what coverage your foundation is too. Like, I don't know whether you'd still see it under a lot of full coverage foundations, but I just think it's better to just slightly blur everything so that everything's soft and nicely blended, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's the face color corrected. Like, you can still see where it's been put, but it's just not those lines that I applied it in. Now I'm just gonna duck off for a minute because we're almost ready to apply foundation, and depending on whether you prefer to apply your foundation with a brush or a sponge, I actually prefer a sponge at the moment. I have used brushes in the past, and there are brushes that I really like for foundation, but at the moment with the type of foundation that I'm using, I use a blending sponge. And when you're using a blending sponge for foundation, it's important that the sponge is damp. So I'm just going to go and dampen my sponges. I actually use 2 sponges, which I'll show you in a minute, and then I'll be right back. Okay everyone, so I've got my 2 sponges. I've got a large flat-edged sponge. That will be for blending my foundation, concealer. I think that's it. Usually later on, and this will be in another video, when I'm using liquid highlighter, I usually blend that with the sponge as well. Now, this is a damp sponge. I've just run it under the tap and then I've squeezed all the water out of it, because you don't want big globs of water in your foundation, because then your foundation's going to look all watery and it's not going to cover very well. I've also got a little mini sponge. This one I actually use to apply baking powder. Baking powder is a powder that we use to set cream products. I tend not to use a huge amount of baking powder because, as I said, I've got dry skin, and if I tend to use too much powder, it makes my skin look even drier and powdery, and it just doesn't look nice. So, as I'll explain later when I do it, I just use a little bit. But obviously, people with oily skin may want to use a lot more powder to set their whole face. Just personal preference and depending on your skin type. So, I've got a liquid foundation here. I actually use 2 types of foundation because it's just personal preference. I really, 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 really love stick foundations, but because my skin's so dry, I like to use a combination of the two. So I've got a little stick foundation here, which I love. This one, I just use it in my under eye area because it just gives me that little bit of thicker coverage where I really need it. So I just kind of run it underneath my eye area and just down the side of my nose there where we put that pink color corrector before. So we're just going to run it across that way and down. So I've got like almost like my nose outlined, if you like. Now, I've got my liquid foundation. Anyway, if you saw that, that's the type of foundation that I use. I think this is a medium coverage liquid foundation, I believe. I really, really like it. There are other foundations that are a lot more viscous that I like as well. But at the moment, this one that I'm using, I really like it. So I just use, let's see if it's going to work today. We're getting to the end of the container, so the pump's like, I'm not really sure. Oh, there we go. So I've just put one pump on the back of my hand. I'll just see if we can get a tiny little bit more because we might need a little bit more. Anyway, doesn't matter. One of the things that I learned when I first started my makeup course, and I did not know this before, so it's a really good tip. You should always warm up your foundation on the back of your hand or on a palette. I am not sure why that is, but obviously it might make it easier to blend, I'm guessing. Anyway, so it's been sitting on the back of my hand for a couple of seconds, and I'm just going to start like grabbing some on my sponge. And I just usually start around my nose area where I put the stick foundation, and then I work my way across my cheeks. Once again, kudos to Hayley Brown. I always apply in a downwards direction so that those little fine hairs on the surface of the skin lay down, and it just gives everything a nice smooth appearance. Thank you, Hayley. So I'm just grabbing a little more. I just grab little bits at a time because you can always put more on if you need to, but if you've got too much on and it looks really thick and cakey, you can't really go back from there. So I'm just doing my forehead now, and I'm just taking it across right up to my hairline, and we'll blend that in later. And we'll just blend across that stick foundation as well. Okay, so I'll just give that a couple of minutes to settle into my skin. I've still got a bit of foundation left, so what I'll do is I'll just give it like about 10 seconds or whatever, and then I'll just start applying the rest over the top of what we've already put. So I'm just patting the sponge into the foundation, and as you can see, the foundation's kind of disappearing now. So I'm just going to re-go over the areas that I did previously, and as you can see, my skin's got that nice dewy look, but the coverage is good as well. I don't look like a piece of paper. This is where we're winning today. So we'll just go across there. Alright. And definitely don't forget the neck. Oh, it sounds like the boys are up. I have pet rats, so that's what I mean by the boys. I don't have a whole heap of sons. Okay. So, that's our foundation on. Just blend a little bit more under my eye there. Alright. Now, I'm just going to let that settle in and set for about maybe 5 minutes. And then the next step that we're going to do is we're going to do some contouring and some concealer. And then we'll be able to blend all of that in with some blush and some bronzer. And then we'll do our baking powder. Okay, everybody. I've just turned the light off because I'm kind of having a problem getting that balance right between natural light and artificial light. Anyway, I hope everyone can see everything properly. Let me know in the comments if anything's not very clear. Now, I'm just going to grab the big face palette again. And I'm also going to find this little brush here. I really like it for contouring because you can make little lines. Now, the thing with contouring is it's all about face shape. The ideal kind of face shape to have is oval shape. Look at that little hair there. I have a heart-shaped face because I have a lot of width here across my forehead and just here at my cheekbones, but I have a quite narrow chin. So what I'm ideally wanting to do is not create more angles because my face is quite angular anyway, but we want to soften those areas of width and kind of like take the corners out of it so that it gives it that more oval shape. So I'm using a powder contour at the moment. As a general rule, I usually prefer to use cream contours, but it was in the palette and you know what, I'm just going to use it anyway. So I've just dipped my brush in to the contour powder. Ideally, your contour colour needs to be at least 2 shades darker than your foundation colour. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to suck in my cheeks because that will give me a really good idea about where my cheekbones are. Now, I don't want to do too much like work around my cheekbones because, as I said, they're pretty angular anyway. But because my face is heart-shaped and it's quite wide here, I want to kind of direct the focus into the middle of my face so that it narrows that section there. So as you can see, I've created that cheekbone line, but I haven't taken it all the way to the middle because I don't want too much focus to be on that cheekbone coming down. I want more focus to be here in the middle of my face on the actual cheeks themselves. So I've just started where when my cheeks suck in, just where that cheekbone edge begins, and you always take it up to the top of your ear because we always want everything to be angled up. It just lifts everything. So once again, I'm going to suck in on my cheeks. That sounded a bit bad, didn't it? That could have been very bad. Suck in my cheeks. And where that cavity underneath my cheekbone starts is where I'm going to begin contouring. Just like that. And one of the reasons why I like this little brush is because you can just run that continuous line without a break in it. Now, next I'm just going to take the corner off the width of my jaw here. And because we don't need to create any more angulation here in my chin, I'm just going to take it from the bottom of my earlobe across this corner and then underneath my jaw, because we don't need to create any more angles there. So I'm just using the bottom of my ear as a reference point, and I'm just giving it that rounded shape as it comes underneath my jaw there. I don't know whether you can see, but it kind of gives it that more rounded shape. So once again, using the bottom of my earlobe as a reference point and just taking it underneath there. Now, my forehead is probably the widest point of my face. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start at the center of my hairline there, and I'm just making like an oval rounded line so that like the line starts there and it almost kind of continues around that way, if you can see what I mean. So it's got that more oval shape. Obviously, if you had a different face shape, the contouring would be different. Now, because I've got quite a bulbous end to my nose, moving on, we're going to do some contouring there too to make my nose look slimmer. Now, how I like to do it is I usually start again using a reference point. I use the edge of my eyebrow, and I'm just going to turn side on a little bit so you can see where the nasal bone starts and then it comes down this way. So I'm just going to start at the edge of my eyebrow and run the line straight down that area where the nasal bone is. Just make that line a little thicker. And then it ends like at the edge of my nostril. Sorry if everyone could see up my nose then. And again, starting at the edge of the eyebrow and just running it down to the edge of the nostril. Yep, that one's good. I'm happy with that. Now, I'm just going to contour the end of my nose, and I'm taking it around there. And if you can see that line just there, where my nose meets my cheek, I'm just going to kind of almost like, I don't know what I mean, like kind of rope off that area with contour so that that whole area there around my nostrils and down to the edge of my nose is contoured. And then I'm just going to run that line across to meet with the other one, and I'm just kind of creating a more tapered shape at the end there. So as you can see, like it's kind of squeezing my nose into a point, which I like. Now, I'm going to put my concealer on next. Let's see, we might use this flat brush again. And I'm going to use a fairly light concealer because my foundation's pretty light anyway. So if I don't use a really light concealer, it's not really going to have the effect that I want. So this one's a cream concealer. It's quite thick. So I'm going to use it for that problem area there underneath my eye. As you can see, I'm just repeating what I did with the color corrector, and then I'm just going to run it down the side of my nose and slightly in towards my lip. So once again, I'll just repeat that on the other side. So I'm just kind of running it under the eye area there. But I'm not taking it right out because, as I said before, I want to kind of narrow my face in that area. So we'll just do that. Okay. Now, I'll just put that over there. I'm going to use a little liquid concealer. And this is just to add highlighted areas to my face, because I want the focus to be in the middle, so that like these wide angles here are more like your eyes drawn more to the middle. I'm just going to put a little dot on my chin, a little bit just above my nose here. Again, I don't want to take it out too far, or otherwise that's going to re-widen that forehead area there. And I'm just taking it up to the top of the cheek there, just so that it meets that cream concealer and that it will all blend together nicely. So it's like drawing into the middle of my face. Now, I've just grabbed my big blending sponge again. Can't talk this morning. I'm just going to use the pointed bit because I don't want to blend it out too far. I want to keep it concentrated into the middle of my face. So just blending that into my chin area, and I just take it up beside my lips so that it will meet up with these areas of concealer under my nose. Yep, so as you can see, like that shape there. Now I'm just going to blend that out, and I only blend it probably out to about the middle of my eyebrow and then stop, because as I was saying before, we don't want to add any more width to that forehead area. Now I'm just pressing the sponge lightly in here because I want the thickest coverage of the concealer to be in that under eye area. And once again, I'm not taking it right up to here because I don't want to add any more width to the angles in my face. So that's the blended side, and that's the non-blended side. So once again, I'm just kind of dabbing it. And then as we get further out, I just stop. Okay, so that's our concealer on. Because, as I was saying before, that we've got cream concealer underneath here, that's where we're going to set with our baking powder. Now, I'm just using a transparent baking powder. A lot of times I like to use a white powder because, if you know me, I like to go with that really white goth look. So sometimes I use a white powder, but today we're going to use a transparent one. Now I've just got my little mini sponge, and of course this one's dampened as well. And I'm just, here's my powder. I've just dipped it in. So we've got our powder there. Now I'm just taking it down the side of my nose and around, and a little bit in that under eye area. But as I said before, I don't want to get too crazy with it because of my skin being dry. Now, a lot of people, especially with people with oily skin, they may want to leave their powder on to set for about 5 minutes. What's that, darling?
Emoji.
Oh, okay. Tegan's just looking at stuff on her iPad. Hi, Tegan. Say hi.
Hi.
Anyway, as I was saying with baking powder, because my skin's dry, I don't like to set it for the full 5 minutes. So I'm just going to go ahead and blend everything else while that's setting. and then I'm just gonna like dust it off. So a lot of people have asked me whether I use contour, bronzer or blush. I use all three. I like to use bronzer to help blend the lines of the contour. And again, because I want the focus to be in the middle of my face, I use blush to draw the attention here. So I've just got like an angled brush that's really soft and bronzer. So I'm just dipping my brush into the bronzer and dusting off the excess. And I'm just running the bronzer brush back and forth over that line there. And as you can see, it's starting to blur. So when I can no longer see an actual line, I usually just turn the brush around and brush up towards the top of my ear. So that's the unblended side. This is the blended side. Okay, so we're going to do this side now. One thing that really fascinates me, the faces that you have to pull when you're doing your makeup, it makes me laugh, really. Okay, so as you can see, that width there is being pulled into the middle. You can start to see the shape now. Okay, so we're going to blend this under here. Just want everything to look soft with no harsh lines. Also, I find underneath there, it helps to blend the foundation into your neck when you do under there. So I kind of like that. Okay, now we're going to do this forehead area. I think I might have forgotten one of my brushes. No, it's not. It's there. So once again, I'm just kind of brush it in the shape that I want it to have, if that makes sense. But then I kind of brush it back towards my hairline just to blend everything in so that it doesn't look like there's this stark line between my makeup and my hair. I actually hate my hair at the moment, so it is what it is. I will do it soon because it's not making me happy. Okay. Now that I've still got this big brush, I'm just brushing it back and forwards across the edge of my, like the end of my nose. But then I'm going to actually use a smaller angled brush to contour like the bridge of the nose and everything. Okay, that's pretty good. We'll just put that over there. So this is my small angled brush. I'm just going to use that to soften the edges of these contour lines. But these ones here on my nose, I don't want to blend it too much because I still want that narrowed shape on my nose. And I'm just kind of blending it up into my eyebrow area. Just like that. And I'm just going to gently like pull it into this. Remember I said the roped off area? Well, we're just going to do that. Okay, so that's my nose contoured. Now we're going to do some blush. I'm going to use a powder blush today, but I have a really, really nice stick blush, which is a cream that I really like. But today, just for argument's sake, we're going to use a powdered one. Okay, so I'm going to concentrate it within this area here, and then we're going to blend it out. So kind of just if you just lift the corners of your mouth, you can see that cheek shape there. So I'm just going to dot it onto there, and then we're going to blend it in a minute. Some people describe it as the apples of your cheek. Another way you could describe it is where that line is there. I usually start at about there. Now, so we've had our baking powder sitting there for a couple minutes now. I'm just going to use that baking powder now to blend everything together. Best off thing that you would be using is a large fluffy powder brush. I'm going to use another angled brush just because I like to circulate my brushes a little bit so that the same one's not getting used all the time. But in theory, a large powder brush would be the best one to use. So I'm just brushing it down the edge of my nose. This is actually called fusting the baking powder off, because you're just kind of like brushing off the excess. So as you can see now, that contour is starting to just completely blur. And then I'm just going to run it under my eye area, just like that. So once again, I'm getting rid of any excess powder, and also we're setting those concealers that we put on there before. Now I'm just going to run down this way, and now I'm just going to blend upwards because we want everything to be lifted and fresh. And I'm just going to brush it until that blush is all blended and it doesn't look like someone's been throwing plums at my cheeks. And you can use a circular motion as well. And we're just making sure everything's blended together nicely, and the powder does help with that actually. Okay, so there we go. That is the face done. We've got foundation, we've got colour concealer, we've got contour, normal concealer, blush, bronzer, and baking powder. So usually my routine after I do the face is I would touch up my eyeshadow, apply eyeshadow in the under eye area, highlight along the brow bone, and a light colour in the inner corner there. And of course, if you know me well, you will know that I am absolutely and completely obsessed with glitter. It's one of my favourite things in the whole world, and so usually at that point I would apply some glitter somewhere. Anyway, that'll be in the next video. So if you have any questions or anything that you want to ask about products, etc., just leave me a comment and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks everyone. Bye.